Hello and welcome. We're so excited to have you all here today to talk about creating workspaces that accommodate hybrid collaboration. Now, as people are joining, please take a minute, introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're joining from, and what your role is. And while you're doing that, we'll introduce ourselves as well. My name is Preston Chin. I am the Director of Business Development here at Lucid Software, and I help partners build really cool integrations with our visual collaboration suite. And I've also worked at companies like the NBA, CBS, and currently I'm based in Seattle, Washington remotely. I've had a mix of both in-person and remote work environments, and I'm super excited to chat with my colleague here, Ellen Thompson. And Ellen, please introduce yourself to the group.
Awesome, Preston. I just think you're so incredible at this, and everyone who's joining. Preston used to be an official professional broadcaster, so I'm not going to be as good as Preston, but it's so incredible seeing this side of Preston on this webinar. So, hey everyone, my name is Ellen Thompson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Learning, Development, and Inclusion at Lucid. I'm currently based in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been at Lucid for just about 5 years and have had the pleasure of working in tech for a little over a decade. I've experienced work as a fully remote employee, an employee in a satellite office, an employee in person, full-time at headquarters, and like many of you, an employee through the pandemic, however we want to classify that. I think maybe we'll call it optional hybrid. I'm excited to share some of my learnings and experiences with you here today.
Awesome. And Jeff from Avocor, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. How's it going? So excited to be here today. It's really great to be having this conversation with Ellen and Preston. Preston, we are always so impressed by you and your background in CBS. You have that natural presence, and similar to both of the folks here, I love collaboration and communication. I grew up performing, doing public speaking across stages and impromptu, and it really taught me the art of communication and connecting people. And I'm really excited to be carrying that into a career now, doing that for over 10 years, trying to connect people over video before the pandemic, before it was the trend of how we work today. And it's been an amazing journey these past couple of years, just learning about all of the different ways that we can actually connect that has tremendous environmental benefits on the way of we can save on carbon emissions. So I'm all in for collaboration across a distributed workforce. I currently work at Avocor today, where we make interactive touchscreen components for the meeting space at the core of who we are, but are expanding that portfolio to really address the needs of our customers who are looking to really just make the best experience for their workforce. So I'm so excited to talk more about that today, and I'll hand it right back to you, Preston.
Let's get it. And I can't help but notice the overwhelming number of folks who are introducing themselves all over. I saw Ake from Gibraltar. We've got Jessica from Toronto, Canada. We got Katie from San Antonio, Mark Mason from Edinburgh, Scotland. It is a wild party here. We got Yogesh from India. I'm super, super excited for all of you to be here. So before we get started, let's just cover a quick few housekeeping rules. So this webinar is being recorded. You can expect an email with a link to that recording within about a day or two from this recording. It'll be sent directly to your email that you use to register for this webinar. Now, that email will also include some additional resources, including a blog post, some more information about our products and how they integrate. Now, let's be clear here. We don't want this webinar just to be us talking at you. So please, just as you've done in this intro, please introduce yourself as much as possible. So, and also ask questions so that we can respond to them in our designated Q&A. And then finally, live captions are enabled for this webinar. So feel free to turn that on if you'd like. So let's dive right into the meat and potatoes. We are all here today because we know work has changed dramatically in the past few years. Obviously with the pandemic. Now, Ellen and Jeff, I want to segue here. How are Lucid and Avocor's workspaces actually set up today? Where do employees work? How do they work together? So Ellen, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lucid has a hybrid first culture as of 2021. What that means is our customer facing teams are generally in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Support roles at HQ are asked to be in the office mostly full time. So, for example, IT and office management roles. And everyone else outside of those teams has the option to go into the office, though it's completely optional. In fact, if we asked all employees within a 50-mile radius of our headquarters to work in Utah, in our Utah office on a single day, we actually wouldn't have enough desks for them. We also have offices in North Carolina, Amsterdam, and Melbourne. In the US, we have around 200 fully remote employees working across 30-ish states. So we're not only tackling time zones and cultural differences amongst a truly hybrid work environment.
Yeah, that's super cool. I have to say that photo of one of your offices of that mountain range, I would be going into the office every day. And so, similar to you all here at Avocor, I think what's really unique about us is we're not just, advocates about this distributed and hybrid work model. We actually embody these every day in our daily operations. Our approach here is really to just champion the effectiveness of what it means to work in different scenarios. So what you'll see in our Portland offices is, like you all, we are embracing this hybrid model where employees are splitting their time between the office and at home. They're working there, 3 to 2 days a week. And then we give them the flexibility to maintain a balance, with working from home or working from anywhere, that allows them to maybe do different tasks within their workflow. But I think what sets us apart even further is that our sales organization is completely remote. I mean, this allows them to be plugged into the regions that they serve, staying connected with their customers and the market, which really demonstrates the power of our products in these real world work scenarios. I think what's really unique about all of this is that when you can rely on technology today to allow you to enable just being effective, no matter if you're in person or working from home or working from a coffee shop, we really have the technology today to really manage different geographies and work environments, and really stoked that we can dive more into that.
That's awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. And as you guys can see from Jeff's and Ellen's examples, every company has approached hybrid work a bit differently. But I think one thing that we can agree on is that there's still a lot that we can do to make hybrid actually work, especially when it comes to collaboration. So we want to hear from you. Like, what are the most challenging aspects about hybrid work? Please drop your comments, your answers to that question in the comment section in this webinar. What have you found most challenging about hybrid work? And as we wait for folks to respond, Jeff and Ellen, can you give us your thoughts on what's been most challenging? Jeff, let's start with you.
Yeah. We have our own challenges here at Avocor that we're facing. And the biggest one is just keeping a positive culture amongst change management. And we talked about this, I think, as we were preparing for this webinar, is just change is a tough thing for everyone. Change in life, change in a new job, change in my kids going from 4 to 6, right? Change is definitely something hard to face in everything we do. So when it comes to work, I think that our biggest thing is just managing that change well. And I'm really stoked to hear some of Ellen's points on this. I think she's got some good hitters, but I think also at the heart of this, obviously, is our topics that we've heard before, ensuring clear and effective communication across these remote environments and with teams, maintaining that cohesive company culture, fostering equity and inclusion. And I love this one, and this wasn't told by me. It was told by a great manager that I've worked for. They said managing performance without micromanagement. So supporting that work-life balance that's going to prevent the burnout that I think we all could either have experienced or could possibly experience if we don't address this correctly.
Totally. And I think what's really cool about this is we each have such different experiences, right? And this is about bridging the gap. And look, I've been on every side of the aisle on this. I've been the manager who wasn't doing a good job being intentional about my team members' experiences. I've been the team member whose manager wasn't keeping me in the loop. I've been a meeting facilitator that over prioritizes the voices of people in the room
Yeah.
and not those on the screen. And I've also been a virtual facilitator with no one on the ground with the skills to help run AV issues for conference tech. Some of the core challenges for me have centered around a skills gap with AV and conferencing tools, like I mentioned, not
Mm-hmm.
having the right configuration set up for a stellar and repeatable hybrid workspace. And honestly, accommodating time zones is so hard.
Mm.
Absolutely. And as you guys are talking, I can't help but notice so
Yeah.
many of you have brought up similar
Yeah.
challenges. I'm seeing relationship building is really
Yeah.
hard from Kristen, from Melody, too many meetings with no solutions. We are
Yeah.
hearing from cross department communication and task tracking. And one
Mhm.
that stood out to me from Dominique is creating culture. That's
Mm.
all really hard. Now, of course, these are major challenges we've all seen, but what happens if we don't address those challenges? What
Mm.
ramifications would result as if we are not to address that? So, Ellen, let's start with you on that one.
Absolutely. Sorry, good at finding my mute button. Another challenge for me sometimes. I mean, my short answer here is a team or company that can't figure out how to hum in whatever type of work environment they're in will see low performance, high conflict, lack of decision making,
Yeah.
quiet quitting, lack of driver
Mhm.
ownership, and ultimately high attrition rates. And
Mm.
companies that can't figure this out will be left in the dust along with the outdated and potentially siloed products that can't keep up in today's fast-paced environment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, Ellen. For me, the big one that you mentioned was the high attrition rate. Poor experiences bleed into just unfortunately a poor culture, which leads to someone desiring to work at a better place. And I think you hit the nail on the head there that if we don't address these challenges for creating better experiences for hybrid work, I mean, the consequences are significant, that are going to impact your organization's ability to innovate, compete, and retain that talent. So those poor experiences lead to team members struggling with technology, which I'm seeing in the comments is a big challenge for folks. They don't feel like they're on par with how to use what's being introduced into these meeting rooms. They feel disconnected due to poor designed collaborative spaces. And, that day-to-day work just becomes really frustrating. And for an organization, people become less efficient. So I think, the next thing, Preston, that I want to bring up about this is just culture and success. The culture of an organization is at stake. And for me, I'm a big culture guy. I'm about coming to work and working well and being in a great environment. So if we don't address these problems, it's ultimately going to affect your day-to-day operations. And so a culture that fails just to adapt to this new way of working, that doesn't support flexibility, collaboration, and inclusion, they're going to have struggles succeeding in this modern business world that we're living in today. I just think as leaders, we just have a real responsibility to create environments that not only meet the needs of today's workforce, but are adaptable for the future. I mean, this just means investing in the right technology, designing spaces that foster this flexibility that we're talking about, and really nurture that culture and values to support hybrid work 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Jeff. And at the start of the pandemic, a lot of companies quickly adopted tools, those
Mhm.
tools and technologies that you're alluding to, Jeff, to make hybrid work happen. But it sounds like you're saying that hybrid work done well isn't just about the right tools and configurations. It's also about blending in the right culture to complement that. So I want to dig into both the configuration of technology as well
Okay.
as the culture setting that's
Yeah,
needed. Let's start with technology, Jeff.
let's do it.
So since this is really where Avocor
Yeah.
shines, we want to know, teams just can't buy technology and call it a day. They
Yeah.
really need to configure it and be intentional with where they place it.
Mhm.
So what would you recommend companies do when it comes to that configuration?
Yeah, this is going to be a fun part. And I think in order to really just lay our framework here, let's really start from a high level, because we've got a lot of different people joining us. Some who are really familiar with technology and how to set up hybrid work, some who are just phasing into this new distributed. So I like to really just start with this. My main point is when integration of hardware and software come together, the best of both hardware and software, that is where you want to start. You want to work with companies who have a great partnership, who are building software for the hardware, and they're working well together. I think this integration is not just about having the right tools, but it's about how the tools work together within the space, which is going to ultimately enhance productivity. I've been in a lot of scenarios where people have a software stack and they have a hardware stack, but they don't necessarily work together. So, employees are walking into a room and really having a difficult time of getting a meeting started right away. And I think that's really at the core of what we're going to get into later in the webinar, shifting into the technical things. But I think the next part about is really making your office. I can't coin this phrase, but I love it. I've saw it across LinkedIn. It's about making that office a magnet and not a mandate. And it's the second part when we think about here on our product team about designing spaces. It's really designing spaces that feel like neighborhoods. A lot of folks who are joining the workforce, and these are our Gen Zers out there, there's a stat where they actually care about how they work and the types of environments they work in. So we're thinking actually about different types of spaces. And Ellen, you showed some amazing pictures of your offices, and I almost feel like I want to toss it to you for a moment to talk about, are those offices where you work, can you share some examples of maybe what that looks like at your place? Because I think the designers and how Lucid has embraced hybrid can really articulate this point that I'm making here.
Yeah, totally. So I actually nerded out with our facilities and real estate manager before
Awesome.
prepping for this webinar.
Yeah.
So shout out Ian if you're on. Thank you so much. And he shares some really cool stuff with me. So as I mentioned before, Lucid has an office in Amsterdam, and we were able to procure and open a completely reimagined office space for our Dutch employees in 2022, which provided a rare opportunity for us to make intentional workspace design choices from literally the studs up. Historically, many of us in this space have had to make workspace ratio decisions based on headcount alone. So things like how many desks should we have? How
Yeah.
many conference rooms do we need? And with what tech? We're all centered around how many people can we count on working from this office, which is completely upended with hybrid policies. So with our hybrid policy in place, we know that on the days that we're not mandating attendance, we're competing against people's home offices, a mighty opponent.
Yeah.
If we only treat the office as a place for people to work, we're going to lose. But if we treat the office like a tool that addresses the workspace needs of different types of work, we can offer more than people's home offices do. So I've got some pictures for everyone. A few fun things about our Amsterdam office. It was designed to keep employees sharp throughout the day. There's never a single path to any part of the office, so they're constantly making decisions and hopefully engaging their creative thinking as a result. There are no assigned desks. We have open desks available for anyone to use in any area of the office. And we have a great ratio of workspaces that can accommodate different types of work, from collaboration and brainstorming to presenting and decision making, from quiet and heads down work to community and connection. We're also finding spots where we can apply this in our Utah office today, though it's tricky to set this up for an office that already exists. So, for example, we have call rooms that were built out for people on calls who needed more quiet areas and lounging spaces for teams to come together organically. I think on our second floor in our headquarters, for any Lucid engineers joining, we've got all of these big beanbag chairs, centered around a big screen, which is pretty fun. So a place for people to connect and brainstorm. So we also have hot desks, so project teams can be near each other, and training spaces for more formal experiences too.
Awesome.
Sweet. Yeah, that's awesome. Sorry, I was reading the comments there. You guys are dropping in some good points. I think what Ellen points out there is that there are a bunch of different spaces that you can design your new way of work for in-office participation. Your head down space, you saw that their offices have huddle type rooms, large meeting rooms when everyone's on board or maybe more people are in the office. And so, just to kind of recap some points that we're making here, and, number one is when hardware and software come together. Number two is just effectively thinking about spaces and how you're designing, not all your conference rooms need to look the same. Your floor layout might change now to facilitate collaboration. And I think once you have those two things, you then need to think about the interactive technology. And this is Avocor's bread and butter here. I think adopting interactive technologies like touchscreens display really take meetings to that next level of engagement and productivity. These technologies should not only integrate seamlessly with the top video providers, but also offer just superior audio and visual quality. Look, it really comes down to this stat that we're showing right here, is that 56% of meetings now involve video conferencing. And this just underscores the need for technology to support interactions without compromising quality. Interactive displays, when paired with the hardware of video and software, can really enhance those meetings. And on this next slide, you're seeing how our Board 65 is used in large spaces. It's used in open office environments, maybe in that executive room when the executive needs to be more hands-on with his iterations or presentations. I just think that when we put all these three things together at the core, remember, a foundation of change management into this new way of work, you have what you need to now begin to think about more technical aspects. And ultimately, which I'm really excited about to hear next, is how this is going to affect culture within your organization.
Yeah, you really segue beautifully into that, because like we talked about, technology without culture isn't going to work by itself. So let's talk about that. Ellen, let's stick with you for one more minute. So how do you think Lucid sets a culture of hybrid work, both for its in-person and remote employees?
Yeah, totally. So you can have all the fancy bells and whistles, but if no one knows how to or invest the time into using them, it's going to be a total waste. So here are 5 things I've learned in my decade in the frontier of hybrid and virtual work. So, first, so hybrid, in my opinion, is one of the hardest culture, meeting type, and work style to pull off well, because it's kind of new. Like, we're on the frontier, and it takes intentionality and innovation, practice, advocacy, openness to feedback, and good tools and systems like we've already talked about. So my advice for you is to look at each cultural touch point, whether it's a program, a meeting, or event, and assess the goals, staffing resources, time available, team context, and budget, and then make an intentional decision if it should be fully in person, fully virtual, or hybrid. Just the act of thinking through this on the onset will pay off and will help you make future decisions around that event. For us, even when we have people joining from a co-located place, like in an office, we still use our products, Lucid Spark and Lucid Chart, to build a hybrid environment to bridge the gap between all of our experiences. My second point for you is I've personally found that in order to execute a stellar hybrid experience, you typically need at least one person responsible for each audience's experience. One team member focused on the virtual participants, the other on the people in person, plus a potential facilitator or presenter. And make sure that everyone knows who they can reach out to if they have questions or need help live. Another thing I'll call out here is how incredible Lucid Spark is for facilitators of hybrid experiences. Everyone might be joining from different workspaces, time zones, departments, frames of mind. But if we get everyone into a Lucid Spark visual activity or brainstorm session, every idea can be brought forward and valued. All right, my third point for you is to set up cultural norms to increase connection. We have a norm that if a meeting is not a webinar, everyone should have their cameras on. Cameras off for us indicates that we are not available to answer a question or participate because my cat just knocked over a plant or someone's knocking on the front door. So we also frequently use Lucid Spark breakout boards to break up large groups of participants into smaller groups to complete activities or discussion questions and try to foster more of those connections. Another pro tip here is we also intentionally create interaction between employees by having like a dedicated Slack channel as a companion experience to meetings. So in other words, we have like a company update Slack channel that goes along with the video conference webinar. So all of our employees chat live during company update meetings, and it's kind of like a Twitch stream. So we use it to share resources from presenters, post polls, share funny memes and GIFs, and create a lot of inside jokes. If you are wondering if it gets spicy, yes, it can get spicy, but the benefit of that connection really outweighs the price for us in this case. I've got two
I
more
love
tips
that.
for you here. Number 4 is cultivating skill sets for hybrid work.
Mm,
So, help people develop hybrid work skill sets like training on your conferencing software, general AV knowledge, and
mhm,
collaboration tools. This is very near and dear to my heart because my main bread and butter is learning and development. And if we're not investing the time to help people learn how to use these things, they're not going to
mhm,
be used. So, in tandem with this is curating a try it out mentality. So, if
mm.
there's a new feature or functionality in a tool that we use, a lot of people who I work with will see me say, "Oh, let's try this out and see how it goes."
Yeah.
And most importantly, I follow up and ask for feedback afterwards because it's important to get that feedback touch point from multiple participants to see how it went.
Mm,
So, for people, and well, that was a really cool experience for me virtually, but if I was, and then reaching out to someone in person, they could have a totally different experience because the
mm.
screen didn't show the right thing the whole time.
Yeah.
So, an example of this, and I've got a picture here. This is an immersive view feature on our video conferencing platform that we use at Lucid, and we use it regularly now because it helps to create a really cool virtual experience, like you're on a panel with this like big Lucid Spark board behind you. All right, last one for y'all, and is kind of like the bow is reframing meetings as experiences. I don't want any of you to walk away from this webinar thinking that the only message was meetings are important, because it's bigger than that. For
Absolutely.
remote employees, those meetings might be their only time for them to experience any type of macro culture that your team, department, or company is trying to create. So it's not just a meeting, it's an experience. And in order to build a good experience, we need to be thoughtful, inclusive, intentional, and open to feedback.
Yeah, that's something that I can certainly resonate with as a remote
Mhm.
employee at Lucid, feeling like, especially in our company updates, like that is an experience to go in the Slack and participate. Just like you say, it's like a Twitch stream, and I really appreciate that. So, Jeff, let's segue back to you. Let's say
Yeah.
that a team has installed everything that you mentioned.
Okay.
Cameras on HD, their
Mhm,
microphone's going to pick up everything. Hopefully,
mhm,
mine is, and the screen is
mhm.
ready for collaboration. But what would you add to Ellen's tips when it comes to setting up that right culture?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that meetings, transitioning to an experience, absolutely. I loved everything Ellen mentioned, and I want to partner with her well on this because I think what I'm going to mention here runs right alongside all of that. Beyond the tech, it's actually about using the technology. Like plain and simple, we have to use. I see in the comments right here, someone said camera on. Like I think every laptop today comes with a camera. Every desktop, you can pair a camera to. So having that camera on, absolutely. But in addition to that, it's about using the interactive screens that are deployed in these types of meetings. They're not just for presentations, but they're a canvas for collective brainstorming, problem solving, and those meetings that require some decision making. I would encourage team members who are in person in offices to actively use these screens during meetings so that they can foster the collaboration of those sitting in their work offices from home or at those coffee shops. When there is participation at the screen, it really makes for productive and involved, inclusive type meetings. Okay, I'll get off that pedestal, but the second point that I want to talk about is really establishing a culture of preparation and respect. This one is big to me. I remember I had a manager that said, no agenda, no attenda. And I can't coin that one either. I got all these great sayings, none I ever made up, but they're really good reminders just to encourage team members to share an agenda in advance. Utilize these collaboration platforms that we have now, from chat to Slack to Google Docs to Microsoft Teams and collaborative notes, just really ensuring that we can start meetings on time and end them on time, because every second counts and goes back to that bottom dollar within companies. And beyond that, it just shows a level of respect that everyone is contributing and setting that positive tone for collaboration. And the last part that I want to talk about, which really mirrors to what Ellen was making a point on was just promoting an environment of continuous feedback. And I think this is really important, especially from the leadership level, to be open to how your employees are experiencing these rooms. You know, with all of this advanced technology and even AI at our disposal, we have to have that opportunity to experiment with these different formats, the styles of meetings, and really just provide the feedback to be given and to be received. And I think this just is not only going to adjust to better improve our inclusivity, but it's just about experiencing with different types of flows within your organization, because every org is different. And it's just going to promote just that continuous culture of improvement. And that's what it's all about. It's how do we get better each day in our tech stack, in our experiences, to create the best way to run these hybrid meetings in the new way of work.
I appreciate that, Jeff and Ellen. I think what I'm hearing from both of you is that the key to hybrid work is a combination of the configuration with your technology and the culture that prioritizes equity, that prioritizes inclusion.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I'm really excited about this as a partnerships person who is a
Yes.
part of our alliance of Google, Avocor, and Lucid to try to solve that problem of how do we create equity and inclusion in our hybrid environment. So our integration with Google Meet and the Board 65 brings the power of Lucid Spark into the meeting room while still including team members who are remote, aren't even in the meeting, but showing's better than telling. So let's just run the tape and show how this integration actually works.
Let's do it.
I'm not gonna lie, I was vibing to that music. I could
Me
vibe
too.
for a bit longer.
Yeah.
But anyways, right back to the show. So, as teams are coming back to the office, they're gonna need that technology that includes remote attendees while still fostering that in-person energy. So here's how I personally see that working. Like we start with Avocor, who provides that technology, keeping people engaged in person, right? While still providing that meeting equity we talked about for remote attendees. And then there's Google Meet, that meeting layer that helps allow those in-person teams to see and hear remote attendees, potentially like myself, and then vice versa. And then Lucid, the third piece of that triangle, which is providing that common working area for the whole team. In-person teams gathering to collaborate on that Board 65, while remote teams are adding their thoughts and ideas on their laptops. And even better, folks that missed the meeting can get right up to speed by looking at the Lucid Spark board later. So I just love that. So that's how Google, Avocor, and Lucid will work together on this. But let's do a rapid fire pitch on the features that'll supercharge hybrid work. So Jeff, you're the guest of honor. We'll start with you. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into this first slide here. And here's where we're going to get technical. Now, for all those joining who are unfamiliar with our Board 65 and Desk 27, we're going to start at it is a touchscreen. So you can touch it. You can use a stylus pin. We call them passive stylus. That allows for just some really unique features with the integrations of software. There's AI in here like, hey, Google, start my meeting when walking into a room. Let's go to the next slide here where we're going to jump into a feature talking about being seen and heard. We talked about the importance of inclusion here. So on our Board 65, you have a all-in-one solution that offers advanced audio features in its 12 mic array that captures your voice and obviously shares the voice of those joining remotely. Now, the really cool part about this is through the AI functionality, you put this in an open office environment, and there is a radius where it only captures the noise coming in from those who are involved in the meeting. Let's jump to the next slide here. I like to talk about camera. We saw a lot of comments on how camera was important with our Board 65, you're getting a 12 megapixel camera at 4K. What's really unique about this is it uses digital zoom at 4.3. So there isn't just a quality lost in how far you are away from that camera. The next part about our solution in our Board 65 really is that it's built for collaboration. So let me pause and slow down and make this a big point. Earlier in our conversation, we talked about the ability to scale across different types of rooms, different environments. And here's where the board shines. You can see here that we have our Board 65 mounted on a cart, but we also include a wall mount for our Board 65, really allowing you to take this into small meeting rooms, large meeting rooms, your huddle rooms, your open office environment. Heck, throw this in your cafeteria so that when you're having conversations over lunch and that great idea comes in, you can hop right up to the board and write something on there. So really what's awesome about our solution in the Board 65 and the Desk 27 is that flexibility, being able to scale across all of these different environments. Did I miss one? I might have, because really putting that emphasis on that first point made earlier, software and hardware coming together. Now on our Board 65 and Desk 27, we have the ability to work with Lucid Spark, which we're super excited about. They hit on some great points on that collaboration, and where we're really seeing our users take advantage of this is all of the extra things that Lucid is capable of with the AI integration. I was using that the other day to generate ideas based off of initial idea that I had. And so now with that embedded into our boards, it really makes for a great experience. What else do we have left here? I think there might be one or two more, but I'll hand it back to you, Preston,
Awesome.
to kind of jump further into that.
Yeah, I love it, Jeff. Well, Ellen, it's your turn. How can Lucid help with hybrid work?
Yeah, totally. So for me, let me go to this next one. For me, the biggest advantage that Lucid creates for hybrid work is leveling the playing field and giving every person the ability to contribute. Like we've mentioned, right? We want to talk about equity and inclusion and how we can bring that into this hybrid model. So I do want to highlight three features that I find myself using the most for hybrid work. So we've got templates, facilitator tools, and visual activities. So templates are great for getting a conversation started. If you're in a room together working on a Board 65, we can start with a template to skip the writer's block phase of any kickoff or brainstorming meeting. And then facilitator tools are huge for hybrid work. I can call all participants to me when I'm discussing a particular area of the board, or I can present the board through frames, which is actually what we're doing right now through this webinar. Both of these aspects really help align teams and avoid distractions. And last, visual activities are a relatively new feature, but they're so fun. It's such a cool way to get a quick temperature check and hear from everyone in and outside of the room. But at the core of our product for me is increasing the ability to connect with each other and ultimately help teams see and build the future.
I love that. I love that. Thank you both so much for that. And I hope you all are as convinced as I am. So, look, if you're curious about getting started with a Board 65 or a Lucid Spark, we'll send lots of resources after this webinar. And I want to save enough time for everyone's questions. So, let's quickly wrap this up. So, Ellen and Jeff gave you great advice, but it might be hard to get started. So, here are some next steps that I would recommend. So, if you're working in an IT, AV, or workspace management role, start with an audit of your hybrid workspace tooling.
Yeah.
Do you have the cameras and the speakers that Jeff talked about? Are they set up in the right way, configured to encourage that collaboration? And do you have an infinite canvas to connect in-person and remote attendees? Have you trained your teams on how to collaborate with a hybrid approach? And for those in any other role outside of the three that I mentioned, it's all about practicing that meeting equity and inclusion that we mentioned. The next hybrid meeting you're in, make sure that remote and in-person attendees are participating equally. And if they're not, start by pausing, ask for a different opinion, or even if it's easier, share a Lucid Spark board to get everyone's thoughts on our canvas. And if Jeff or Ellen mentioned a tool or an idea that you want to start using at your company, let your IT and workspace teams know. All right. And with that, let's open it up to questions.
Yeah, that was a great wrap up there, Preston. Really appreciate you emphasizing those points. I think that's really at the heart of what we were trying to get across today, for sure.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, let's let the questions trickle in, and I'm seeing one pop up right here. So, can you talk about other cultural norms or expectations that you have set for meeting participants? Ellen, maybe I'll push it over to you first.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done at Lucid is we printed out like a hybrid meeting etiquette checklist, and we have it printed and laminated in every single conference room right next to where you start the meeting. So it's hopefully spurring a top of mind moment for whoever's running the meeting to think through, all right, well, is there a chair in front of the camera? So blocking participants' views. Can we do an audio check and make sure everyone can hear? Thinking about, how are we encouraging participation and bringing in that meeting equity? Jeff, do y'all do anything interesting in Avocor on this one?
I don't like to overcomplicate this one because I think we want to keep meetings simple, right? And so for us, our top biggest cultural norms that we promote is video on when possible. So don't do that while you're driving, because some people I know have to take calls from the road. So video on, clear meeting agenda, and any materials sent in advance. I think maybe I didn't mention that one, but if there are documents that you're going to be reviewing for meetings, send those in advance ahead of time. And I think just having, someone set up as a moderator or facilitator, right? So I think Ellen touched on this earlier, making sure someone's attentive to those who are on the far end, asking them, participants. So if, Preston, do you have a question if he's taking that meeting from home, or what input do you have? So yeah, I think, and the last one, I think, which is a great tool. So if your platform that you use supports it, is recording the meeting. With the AI summaries and the capability that AI is doing to recap for those who cannot be in attendance, because there is meeting overload nowadays, is recording those meetings so that people who aren't in attendance also feel like they're still a part of the conversation and can catch up, especially stakeholders that might be involved in those decision-making processes.
I
Awesome.
love that. And Jeff, maybe one other thing to add on this is we really have a we have a expectation on employees that we like to communicate. If there's something we can fix, like bring it up.
Yeah.
That feedback and like cultivating that culture of feedback, so that way we can understand what we can be doing better, is really helpful for us, because I worked at companies in the past where remote employees were too scared to speak up. And so I would get like a Slack message and say, hey, can you ask this person, like, can you ask the Q&A moderator in person, like this question for me? I'm too scared to speak up. And at Lucid, luckily, we don't really have that sentiment. People just feel, hopefully, and that's what we try to cultivate, a sense of like psychological safety of bringing things up. So that way we're able to be our best and bring our best forward and problem solve together.
Yeah, totally.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And what are some of the ways that those facilitating a meeting between in-office and hybrid team members can make sure that everyone's engaged and able to participate?
Yeah,
Ellen,
Jeff,
I'll
do you want
start
to
with
go on
you.
this one? Oh, I
Yeah.
can go first.
Go for it.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, having somebody designated and responsible for every audience has been my hack. So, having somebody who is handling all of the webinar participants, and we actually have a team on the back end who are helping us and bringing all the questions forward. So this is a great example. They're pulling the questions forward for us so we can focus on answering your questions and prepping for the next one. And we have somebody who, and we don't have anyone in person right now, but if we did have someone in person, we'd have that same role for someone for the in-person attendees. So I think that's really important. The other thing is interaction. Jeff, you talked a lot about this too, and bringing in those activities and being very collaborative, I think, are so core. If you're in a meeting and it's crickets, you can feel that you're not getting anything done. And the more voices we can have at the table and the more interaction we have together, the bigger problems we're going to be able to solve. But Jeff, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I'm going to tackle this one as well as a question I see in the comments about just how do you get people to engage on camera and having that on. And I think that aligns with what we're talking about. I think just first, fostering engagement. You brought up a lot of great points. I think using an interactive agenda, so incorporating like a Q&A, like throughout maybe the topics of discussion. What do you think about this, instead of here's the next topic, let's discuss through. So asking questions throughout your agenda is really important. I know we use the breakout capability within our software. So on our larger brainstorming, where there's participants, maybe having like a 5-minute breakout session to split up that agenda on the different topics is really unique in getting people engaged, because you go from maybe a 12-person where there's little time for speaking opportunities to a 4-person group where you can facilitate more conversation. I definitely think it's about the visuals and the media. So Lucid is a great tool to partner with your meetings so that people can throw up maybe an idea or topic. And then as far as like, promoting like actual physical, like on camera appearance, one thing we like to do is just set the expectation early. So in that meeting invite, encouraging, hey, everyone, we're really excited to get on this video meeting where we'll have our cameras on to see each other for those we haven't connected with in a while. And then I think it's about sharing why. It's about setting those cultural expectations, having the camera on. It just, it builds trust. It makes meetings feel more personal, more effective. And we have to lead by example too. So I know I've gotten on some of my upper management, asking them why their camera wasn't on, like a side conversation, just saying, hey, you all, you set the tone of our company. Was there a reason why you didn't have it on? We are trying to promote this. And so keeping people accountable in a very nice way also helps. And so, I think if you do notice someone who's constantly having an issue where they're not turning on their camera, offer support. I think that's what it's about, is reaching out and say, hey, maybe they're not proud of their camera quality. Maybe they need a hand to get a camera suggestion, or they haven't used that stipend for the hybrid work environment to go out and use what's best. So you never really know what's at the heart of it. But I think setting expectation, keeping communication lines open really helps to not only promote engagement, but foster active participation.
That's awesome. Great answer. And I couldn't agree more with everything you said. Well, segueing over to the next one, this is actually one that kept coming up in the early part of this webinar when we asked for the challenges people were facing. And a lot of folks were saying building relationships with remote employees is really tough. How do we handle that? So, Ellen, what are your thoughts on this one?
In the height of Zoom, or in the height of COVID, you could not pay me to go to another Zoom happy hour. I was so fatigued on Zoom. And I think that there's a lot of people who are remote employees who are experiencing this too. Like it's hard to feel, how do you spark that connection with somebody over Zoom? And, I wish there was a silver bullet for this, because I think everyone's still figuring it out. But I find that if I have good remote, like good relationships with my remote friends, like I'm meeting with them one-on-one and hearing how they are doing, and like what's going on in your life, like what's stressing you out right now outside of work, like who are you outside of work, is really helpful for me personally. And it helps make it easier to work with someone, because intentionality, I think, is the core here. Like the more intentional we can be, because we're not having those those water cooler chats in person, it's really hard to recreate that. So instead of letting that happen organically, we have to be more intentional in a hybrid space with our remote friends. And I think it's really like built on that relationship of trust and understanding each other. So I think that's kind of at the core of it for me.
Makes a ton of sense. I love that. Cool. Well, how can we bake more authenticity, logic, and empathy into the meetings powered by Lucid? Ellen, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, totally. I love anyone who I work with knows I love a good framework. So I'm going to go look up authenticity, logic, and empathy after this and get a little more familiar with it. But, one thing that Lucid does, I think visual activities are a really great way to bring in that authenticity, right? Where you're, you can do a fun icebreaker activity, and yes, it might feel contrived, but leaning into it a little bit, like, let's vote on, what are your opinions on, is a hot dog a sandwich, or what's the other one? Have y'all heard of that?
Is a
Like,
hot dog a hot dog or a sandwich?
yeah, like, so, like a visual activity on that, like, spark some connection and get people laughing and getting to know each other. And we've got some templated visual activities on fun little icebreakers like that, which can really help to build those connections in a team. And maybe you laugh a little bit for 5 minutes at the start of the meeting, build that authenticity, and build some connections there.
Mm-hmm.
Makes
Totally.
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Preston, what do you think?
Yeah,
You're an
let's
expert on
throw the
this
question
too.
back to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, y'all are the experts. I mean, look, what I would say when it comes to building authenticity, one, what I've done personally is, as a remote employee, I'm pretty intentional about the one-on-ones that I set up. So whether it's direct colleagues, those that are tangentially related to my field, I do this with our partners. I do this with my colleagues. I do this even with folks that are based in Seattle that are also Lucid folks, meeting them in person whenever I can. And that periodic one-on-one schedule, I'll literally have it in my calendar carved out as like one-on-one periods where it's every 2 hours. And I might have a block out, every 2 weeks. I'll cover something that way. So just being very intentional about how I schedule it is at the forefront of it. And then even when it comes to visual activities, I love, and once you guys can see it, it's all about being able to see the differences of opinion, right? That's where the conversation starts. So like Ellen might think that a hot dog is actually not a sandwich, and I might think it is, right? And then that discrepancy of opinion allows you to, shall I say, get into a more sparky debate. So
yeah, it's definitely
anyways.
a sandwich. It's definitely a sandwich.
Awesome. Let's segue to the next question. 50% of our tech hardware is Apple. Is Avocor going to collaborate with them in the future?
Oh, I love
Jeff,
this question.
Segue to you.
Yeah, I'm a big Apple user too. So shout out to this user. I love that the hardware you are using are Apple. I'm a big Apple person, and you're lucky to have me on the product team at Avocor, who loves Apple. So I would say today our products work with Apple. When you think about wireless content sharing, we have something called Montage, where you can Apple AirPlay into your meeting. You can connect your Apple compute directly into any of our displays across our product portfolio through USB-C, one of Apple's kind of big revelations in bringing that USB-C connectivity to their phones now in the 15 and to their their laptops as well. And so I definitely think we work with Apple. There is I can't say at the moment no direct connection into developing something together, but the great news is that our stuff is OS compatible for their Mac OS. And so I love that question just because I'm a user. But for all of my PC folks out there and Android users, we also have, Android connection into our screens as well through our wireless sharing. And we're really trying to think about that customer experience when walking into a meeting and making it as easy as possible. So when you open that laptop, no additional cords or software is needed to connect your laptops wirelessly into the meetings. And that goes for your customers as well. Sometimes they come in and you might be a Google House, but their meeting is Zoom, etc. At Avocor, at the heart of who we are is connection and collaboration. And we know when connection comes, you can't be tied down to a singular mode of how you do that. So we definitely all are all about flexibility.
Love that. Makes a ton of sense.
Okay, I
Awesome.
found the visual activity about the sandwiches or the hot dogs.
Uh-oh, here we go.
We gotta do it. We gotta show it.
Here's what it'll look. So in real life, what we would do is I would share this link out, and Preston, Jeff, and I would all go in and we would drag, all right, do we think a hot dog is a sandwich or not? And so you'd go in, and toast for me is not, pizza is not. So we'd all have our different responses, and then you'd submit at the end of it, and we can see where we disagreed and where we agreed. And it is so fun and just a quick way to have that little touch point.
Yeah.
What do y'all think about pie? I don't know about pie.
Ooh.
Not a sandwich.
We might need a whole other webinar just to tackle that one.
Yeah.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, this is our last question of the day in this webinar. Any tips for working together across large time differences? This is
Mhm.
a good one. Ellen, any thoughts here?
Oh my gosh, it is so hard. This is a really tricky one. If I had two wishes, it would be to have an answer for time zones because I think that's a really hard one. And the other one is that everyone would read their email. But for time zones, what we often do is we have two options. So we try to find the one first and foremost, find the most common times and have those be
Mm,
like the slots, right?
mm,
Like for us, it's 9 a.m. Mountain and 4 p.m. Mountain, and we go to those time zones, and or we have those slots, so we have an AM and PM option. The AM can hit our Amsterdam and East Coast friends, and then the PM hits our West Coast and our um, Melbourne friends. And
mhm,
then Utah employees or anyone in Central, or they have the choice of AM or PM. So we try to make it equitable and offer options. We also do a lot of recording watch parties. So we coordinate
mhm,
with the offices and say, hey, we're doing a webinar. It's at 12 p.m. Mountain. Sorry, it's 2 a.m. your time. So if anyone's on, they should go to bed. They shouldn't stay on and work for this. But we've got the recording. Would y'all want to, watch parts of it and then do a discussion live? Would you want to distribute this to the team? It's an option available for you because a lot of the stuff that I'm doing are like workshops and webinars and stuff. So we try to make it as equitable as possible, but sometimes we only have one time slot we can do with one facilitator, and that's what it is. And
mhm,
what we can do around that though is be, like we mentioned before, intentional about how we're engaging with those people, building good relationships, and trying to meet them in the middle where we can. So if our Dutch employees came to me and said, hey, we want to do a Clifton strength session, and we can only do this time, like I would try to accommodate that and like wake up early and do the session for them, because they do, so they, where I can, I try to flex and trade favors, I guess. Jeff, what do y'all do? How many time zones are you working with?
I live this every day as our marketing team is mainly based out of the UK, and I'm here on the West Coast in sunny California. Not that the UK is not sunny, it's actually beautiful. But I think what we do is we actually rotate meeting times. So there are times where I'll be up really early in the morning to accommodate, a favorable time for those on the other side of the pond, and they do that vice versa. And I think that really just establishes some respect and trust amongst the team that I'm willing to, inconvenience maybe some morning sleep to be able to meet your time, and they're able to do that on the same for maybe some of their evening time with their families. So that's really a really great way to exercise that. I think the next one that can't always be done. So I talked earlier about recording meetings. I think it's really important that should they host a meeting where I'm not available, that they're recording it and sending it to me so I feel like I'm still involved. I can catch up on that. And then vice versa, I'm doing the same as a courteous. We have a running folder where we're dropping in those recordings and maybe even sending out a note. Hey, we had a quick chat, even for the quick chats. Like, let me highlight that. Like, I care about the little things and the little details. And so, if you have a 15-minute conversation and there's actually some action items out of there, how can you keep me in the loop of what's going on? Which brings me to another point. I think having a like project management tool, we use Monday here at Avocor, and we stay organized by not only keeping chat within our meeting application, but also within project and deliverables and timelines. If there was an update out of a meeting, taking those action items and recording them well. The short of it, when you're working across large time zones, is actually being very organized and being respectful to be organized to keep team members in the loop so that everybody has whatever your team establishes as a central location of truth, the ability to go there and check out what's going on because of those time zones.
Wow, beautifully said. I love that. Ellen, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think, the other thing that's bringing to mind is when we were prepping for this webinar, we were talking about equity in terms of three different things. And one was information equity. And that really rang true for me, Jeff. And, making sure that everyone has the right information and the single source of truth is so helpful. So you're all kind of working on the same page. And I think that's a really great call out when we're trying to work through this hybrid model and people all over the world. And I think one last thought on this is, you know, the standards that you set, like as a company, right? If you're making a decision to have a company-wide event at a time that doesn't work for, you know, 20% of employees, like that's a decision, right? And that's setting the cultural tone of how you're prioritizing people's time. And if, you know, you're not offering something nice of like, hey, you know, you might not be watching it live, but we've got an executive who's going to be watching this webinar for you in your time zone, right? Like there's small things that we can do that's just intentional, and it's just like intentionality and spending the time. So yeah, I think what our actions set the culture and our actions set the norm.
Lovely, lovely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending this webinar. From the bottom of my heart, I'm super grateful to have gotten a chance to work with Ellen, Jeff, the whole team preparing for this amazing experience, this conversation. And for all of you that have attended from all over the world, big, big, big thank you. So let's call this one. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. And if you have any questions, yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.